If you were unsure what the phrase squandered potential meant, look no further than Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. A massively fumbled premise that does nothing more than reaffirm why the ladies find Patrick Wilson sexy.
Oh. Shit, that make your pussy throb right there.
And even with that statement, I would still rank this film as probably the best of the DCEU. Yeah, I know, that doesn't mean much given how low the bar is, but hey, look at all the eye candy we got.
Calm down. Get a hold of yourself.
Bet you didn't think Aquaman was the only thing getting wet in this video. So, with that in mind, get a bucket and a mop and let's break this movie down. And fair warning, spoilers ahead. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom takes place a few years after the first film, and instead of, shit happening, the movie starts off with a 5-minute catch-up where we learn that Arthur and Mera got married, had a kid, his mom is back in Atlantis, Orm and his delectable muscles are in prison, and Arthur is now king. He doesn't like being king though, and instead splits his time between the land and the sea to focus more on raising his son, Arthur Jr. Why can't the baby live in Atlantis? Fuck if I know. And in all this time, Manta has been searching for ways to repair his busted armor, and has employed the assistance of Dr. Shin, a character played by Randall Park that had about 30 seconds of screen time in the previous entry and is so dead set on finding Atlantis that he made himself a perfect target for Manta's enslavement. By the way, it's through Shin that we learn 613 days have passed since the last movie. Shin falls through a crack in Antarctica or the Arctic or Greenland, some generic snowscape, and finds the frozen kingdom of Necrus, aka the Lost Kingdom in the film's title, aka the Seventh Kingdom of the Seas that's also referenced in the first film, aka the Dead Kingdom because every time I say Necrus, my phone assumes I've developed a new hobby looking at decomposing bodies. As Manta and his team explore this Dead Kingdom, he finds a dark trident that grants him a connection to Necrus's frozen king, who promises Manta all the power in the world to kill Aquaman in exchange for his release. They also find a bunch of tech which Shin conveniently retrofits. And it turns out this ancient stuff runs on a fuel called Oricum? Listen, if Nicole Kidman can't pronounce it properly, why should I? This orcum is highly volatile and extremely detrimental to the Earth. Oh, and we'll definitely circle around back to this point. Turns out the last remaining orcum is locked away in Atlantis, and it's Manta's attack on the city that leads Arthur to breaking Orm out of the Desert Kingdom, where he's been imprisoned since the last film, in hopes that Orm will hopefully help him find where Manta's hiding out. The rest of the movie just kind of flows as you'd expect from here. Failed humor, Manta goes after Arthur's family to awaken the Necrus King, everything gets resolved though, Arthur's wife and kid are found, and a cheesy ending where Atlantis finally reveals itself to the humans for an alliance to reverse the effects of climate change.
Are you serious right now, bro?
That's right! Greta Thunberg must have been hired on as a consultant because the climate change agenda is shoved in whenever the writer's room feels the need to unnecessarily explain parts of the plot. One or two mentions could be forgivable, but it becomes a central focus in the majority of the conversations Arthur has with, well, everyone aside from his dad and brother. Because of global warming, the ice melted away to reveal the lost Dead Kingdom. Human activities over the last century led to ocean acidification that created a plague in the seas. That killed Vulko, Aquaman's mentor. A minuscule plot detail that ends up not making any sense, by the way. The Atlanteans don't want to ally with the humans because of all their tootin' and pollutin', and want to remain hidden even though the world learned Atlantis exists in the Justice League film. An entry to the DCU that is both annoyingly canon and non-canon. The Orc-cum fuel was abandoned centuries ago by the Atlanteans because of how many greenhouse gas emissions it gave off. A piece of information that is intentionally given to you and forgotten when Arthur and the gang blow up Manta's Orc-cum lair, and you see that shit just leaking willy-nilly into the ocean. Arthur suggests that allying with the humans would mean they could share their tech with each other and it would help them reverse the effects of climate change. Oh, and whenever a TV is on, they're just talking about the effects of climate change. Activism aside, the characters end up being the most prominent pieces of why this film objectively has issues. Dr. Shin seems to be a better scientist than fucking Einstein, since not only does he understand climate data to a T, but he's an oceanographer, a tech whiz, and a tactical navigator. He's a spineless nerd who, despite this endless skill set, gets sucked into Manta's quest for revenge and honestly doesn't have much of a purpose, aside for guiding in the next large plot occurrence. Speaking of Manta, much like the first film, he isn't a villain. He's a placeholder for conflict and nothing more. Mera acts as much the same as Dr. Shin. Yes, the controversy surrounding her divorce with Johnny Depp ultimately pushed WB to condense a lot of her screen time. And even with the cuts, her scenes still make a lot of sense. Yes, they do. And anyone saying otherwise is likely spending too much time dicking down their vacuum cleaner.
I said don't disturb you, I'm cleaning my room!
She's really just there to remind the audience that Arthur does in fact have a wife, and she sorta helps him govern Atlantis. She shows up whenever Arthur is put into difficult situations, which are always contradictory to the strengths, powers, and limits Arthur has at his disposal as a superhuman. Speaking of Arthur, his entire arc as a character in this film is meant to be dependent on two things: his unyielding desire to be a family man and the phrase, "True kings build bridges," both of which are contradicted at every turn. The opening monologue really shoves in that Arthur is a doting father, but past that he puts himself into so much careless danger, disguised as fun for him though, that much like Dear Viewer, he forgets that he has a kid until the last 25 minutes of the film, wherein Arthur Jr. becomes the primary reason for Arthur and the gang to head to Necris's frozen grave. When it comes to his brother Orm, as soon as he's broken out of the Desert Kingdom, a place that was shown to be completely abandoned in the first film when they raided that ultra-secret weapons chamber, but is now filled with blood-sucking Skeletors, Arthur immediately matches Orm's disdain and chides him. The immaculate humor surrounding what is attempted to be brotherly jesting is lost completely, as there is no residual affection from Orm, who had been raised to hate Arthur. This playfulness never reaches as a result, and all of Arthur's comedic moments fall into the realm of petty and cruel, especially when he's calling Orm a straight-up asshole in the middle of a mutated forest. But the film doesn't recognize this blunder and tries to backtrack in the final 10 minutes, where we get a flashback from Aquaman 1 where Arthur is like, "Bro, I just want to be your bro for reals though." And that magically keeps Orm from tipping into undead Sauron's grasp. This all ties into the haphazard subplot of Arthur being Atlantis' king, which ends up being less reminiscent of the strong togetherness Orm's leadership had, and more like Canada's House of Commons whenever Justin Trudeau accuses Jewish members of supporting Schnazis.
Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas.
Arthur doesn't want to be king, and it's obvious he can't build bridges based on several instances in this film. He wants to be a father more than a ruler, and this puts Atlantis in a state of unease because he can't manage his responsibilities whatsoever, as pointed out by the Atlantean Council. The same council that he doesn't seek to find a middle ground with when it comes to the humans, and instead insists that his vision is the only one that matters. Rather than the argument that, hey, I was in a few other films that explicitly established an alliance would be beneficial to fight off the endless alien villains that want to destroy the planet we share. He breaks Orm out of the Desert Kingdom, which burns a bridge by committing treason, putting his kingdom at odds with the Sand Dwellers, which inevitably will create chaos when he finally does ally with the humans at the end of the film. And instead of using the vast armies and resources at his disposal, he takes every royal of importance on a suicide mission to the kingdom of Necris in the final act of the film, which had a 50-50 chance of leaving Atlantis in the hands of the same council that wants to eliminate the humans. But, you know, with all that selfish thinking, apparently everyone in Atlantis still trusts Arthur and his desire to reveal their kingdom to the world.
Relax. It's not Blue Peter. Have a nice little relaxing smoke of crack.
Orm and his delicious physique are really the only things that are given a story, despite Arthur Curry being our protagonist. The disdain he has for his older brother is still there and strong, given that Arthur's existence is what led him to almost 2 years of imprisonment. He understands the stakes at hand, and his reasons for partnering with Arthur against Manta and Necris are so he can protect the kingdom he was raised to lead. By the end of the film, even though it's flimsy, he accepts that he has a brother who, regardless of everything, does care and want the best for him. And it's that ends up leading him to a playful but useless post-credit scene of him eating a burger, something part of a realm that he spent his lifetime disregarding as nothing more than a dry hellhole. It's this teeny tiny subplot that leaves me torn with Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. The issues addressed above share as much screen time with missed potential. And regardless of the fact that this is now the official end to the Snyderverse, what the sequel should have focused on, without the promise of a continued universe, was Arthur accepting his role as rightful leader of Atlantis. As previously mentioned, Arthur is spread thinly between the family life and desire to protect humanity on land and his birthright as King of Atlantis, a civilization that until recently was ready to wage war against the humans. Ideally, this inability to find balance and understand where his allegiance should lie would finally come to head in this sequel via the death of his firstborn son.
You're not trying to draw a psycho picture. You really are crazy.
I know, it's evil, but hear me out, alright? Alongside Manta's revenge plot to take out Arthur and everyone he loves, it's revealed that the only way to fully free the King of Necris is with the blood of an Atlantean, who way back when sealed Necris's fate with his blood. Manta, under the control of Necris, had kidnapped Arthur Jr. as he was the easiest target to get this done. Since these movies don't like to dive into such dark waters, Arthur Jr. would have died at the end of the first act of the film. Possibly Mara too, as she's almost killed by Manta in the first 30 minutes anyways. At the same time, our biggest threat, the Dead Kingdom, would also be introduced around here instead of in the last 30 minutes of this almost 2-hour flick.
Are you serious right now, bro?
The loss of the only thing he truly desires, family, would then push Arthur to take full advantage of the armies of Atlantis and use the threat of Necris to forge an alliance with the humans that he so desperately wants. A typical fight would probably ensue, and alongside it more political tension with the Atlantean Council, who have been weary of his leadership anyways. And this weariness would reintroduce Orm, creating a secondary antagonist that equally feeds into Arthur's grieving, while swaying him to try cementing some sort of relationship with the only family he has left. Ultimately, through more character focus and less gung-ho CGI fights, Arthur would settle more comfortably into the role of king, but still know that there's work to do in getting Orm to see eye to eye with him. It's not a perfect fix, but it would bode far better with the two things I had mentioned this film is built around: family and kings building bridges.
Okay, yeah. You make a good point.
The glaring issues aside, some of which I didn't even touch on, like the unnecessary Polynesian culture injections that have no influence on the plot and are not even a building block for Arthur's personality, the reduction of Aquaman to just super strength and speed instead of exploring, his aqua abilities, and the decision to catch the audience up with rushed overviews instead of world building, I kind of enjoyed Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. It leans away from the super heavy CGI to introduce more real sets, which in this day and age was extremely appreciated, and introduces a lot of world elements that were kind of cool, like the desert and Dead Kingdoms. As a result, I rank this as a better film than the first, despite Momoa keeping his shirt on the whole time. Yeah, I said it, Jason Momoa is hot, and I'm sick of acting like all of us wouldn't skip past the opportunity to ride this dude like a pogo stick.
Oh my.
It's a flick I'd be happy to throw on in the background, knowing that it commits a lot of basic script and world-building sins, and won't leave a lasting impression past me finally realizing why Patrick Wilson is a babe. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Merry Christmas and stay frosty, friends.